Don't you worry about a thing, no. Cause everything gon' be alright. My God can take away your pain, though. You could be crying in the morning and smiling by the night. Life goes on. It goes on. It goes on. Yeah, life goes on. It goes on. It goes on. It goes on. Don't you worry about a thing. Don't be anxious. Just pray for everything that's in your brain. You know he waiting. He can be your umbrella when it rains. Just gotta be patient. But what you waiting for? What you waiting for? Answer the call now while he's near to you. You got a friend in me too, and I'm gonna be there for you. It's just the Lord in me. I wasn't always this way. I was going the other way, and God showed me this way. Couldn't do this on my own. I needed some help. Had to swallow my pride. Asked God to open my eyes. Yes, I was trapped in my mind. I was a slave to my skin. When Jesus freed me from sin, I heard he died for my sins. I put my faith in him. Don't you worry about a thing, no. Cause everything gon' be alright. My God can take away your pain, though. You could be crying in the morning and smiling by the night. Life goes on. It goes on. It goes on. Yeah, life goes on. It goes on. It goes on. It goes on.
Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to Life Circle Connection, Strategies for Clear Communication. My name is Stephen Paul Samuel, and I would like to take the next few moments and thank you for taking time out of your evening to share with us in this circle of learning and growth. We are appreciative to the AACPA, the founder, leader, board members, all of you who are part of the AACPA for sponsoring our time together tonight. And let me just say congratulations. Congratulations to all of you who are sharing with us for making this time a time of growth, a time of development, for investing in yourself. There's no greater investment that you can make than to invest in your own personal growth and personal development. I'm very respectful of your time, and so I want us to jump right in to our lesson for tonight. We call it Strategies for Clear Communication. Strategies for clear, C.L.E.A.R. communication. And we're going to walk through some strategies that can help improve us as purposeful and effective communicators. You know, after leading and being the senior leader of two nonprofit organizations over the past 20 years, having to speak to people in the most sacred moments of their lives, as well as do business for the organization in the marketplace, I have come to learn two things. The most rewarding thing that you can have is effective communication. But I've also learned that it's the most challenging. Purposeful communication can be challenging. Not only that, but to think about the fact that I've been married for 20 years, I'm a parent, I have a child that is 18 now, and having to parent and be in a relationship, I'm a son, father, husband, all these things, I have come to learn the same two things are true. There is nothing more rewarding, nothing more enriching than to be able to effectively communicate. And yet there's also nothing more challenging than to have purposeful communication. And so tonight, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what it means to be a purposeful communicator. And I'm going to do this in a very informal way, is I want to make sure that I add value to your life, I want to make sure that I respect your time, but I'm also going to pour into you as much as I can about effective communication. Now, it's kind of interesting because, to be honest, this is more of an informal talk. So I'm talking through communication with you. I'm not really necessarily trying to impress you with my communication skills, but I do want to talk about what it means to truly be an effective and a purposeful communicator. recognizing that from the boardroom to the bedroom, from the courtroom to standing on a stage, wherever we are, whatever arena of life we find ourselves in, we need to be mindful of our communication and how we communicate. And we need to become more effective in our communication. And so that's what we're going to talk about. I hope that you just walk through this with me. I'm going to talk slow, going to go through some notes, going to make sure that I pause and give you an opportunity to write down and take whatever notes you need to take as we deal with clear communication, C.L.E.A.R. As a matter of fact, if you're taking notes, you can go ahead and put that on one side of your paper, C.L.E.A.R., and just list it down. We're going to go through these strategies for effective communication. So come on, y'all. Let's get started. The word communication comes from a root word which literally means to make common. We think about communicating. What we're talking about is transferring or imparting information between two parties. And in order for that impartation and that transferal of information to be clear, we have to now use some strategies for clear communication, to make it common, to make sure that we are understood and that we are understanding. All right. So the first strategy, the word clear, we're going to start with the letter C. The C in clear signifies simply we want to take command of our communication. We want to take command of our communication. Words matter, right? Communication matters. How we communicate matters. What we communicate matters. And because it matters, we want to take command of our communication, to understand that we are in control of what we communicate. We're not in control of what people say to us, but we are in control of what we communicate, how we share, and what comes across in our communication. And so you got to take command of those words, because those words matter. And I am in control. You are in control of your communication. As a matter of fact, think about it this way. This is a picture that I want to give you. The word strategy comes from a Latin root, which literally means a commander. It means a commander. Think of a general or a commander in an army. And the word strategy means commander. And so when you think about strategies or coming up with strategic processes, what you're really saying is that you want to take command of a particular topic. For us tonight, our command, what we want is to take command of our communication, because words matter. So now hold on to that picture. That's the picture you're going to hold on to. The words, that's your army. That's your army. And you send them out every single day. You communicate every single day, whether it be through email, on the job, at home, in your personal, private life. You are communicating, and that's your army. They're going out to fight your battles. They're going out to defend you, right? This is the image. But here's the thing. No general, no captain of an army, no commander would ever put his soldiers in danger without a strategy. No commander, no general would ever send his soldiers out to battle without thinking about their movements, without thinking about their effectiveness, without thinking about their safety. No general would ever do that. And so we don't want to do that. We don't want to send our words to communicate out in the world and not think about strategically how we're communicating. And so the first letter, C, we want to take command of our communication. We want to make sure that as we're sharing with others, that we are building bridges to understanding, that we're building understanding and building relationships. We want to make sure that we are, and we see this sometimes, because we know that there are certain environments where we have to adjust our communication. We don't communicate with certain people the same way we communicate with others. We find someone we just met, we'll communicate with them one way. Someone that we've been in a relationship with for years, we communicate a different way. If you're at home with your family, you communicate one way. If you're in a courtroom or in a boardroom, corporate setting, you're communicating in a different way. What I am asking you to do, I'm asking you not to put that on autopilot. Again, I said we sometimes do it. We just adjust. Environment, situation, we adjust. But we do it on autopilot. What I'm asking you to do is to make sure that you are taking command, that you are not doing that on autopilot, but you are doing it with intentionality, that you recognize the power of your words. You recognize that communication and words matter. And so I am becoming more mindful of communication. You and I, we're working to become more mindful. Remember that the word mindfulness is just about thinking about how we think, right? That's what mindfulness means, to think about how we think. To think about the things that trigger us, to think about what goes through our minds in certain situations. Well, what I'm saying is, let's take that same idea and apply it to our communication. Let's become more mindful, and let's really think about how we talk and how we communicate, how we share, and to make sure that we are intentional about sharing in a way that builds bridges of understanding, in a way that is effective, in a way that is purposeful, that leads us into the relationships that we desire. Let's become more mindful of how we think. Now, some of you listening to me, you may do this again. It may be on autopilot. There are times in conversations where you may pause, you may stop, and whether you say it out loud or you say it mentally, you make a statement like this: let me think about how I want to say this, right? Or something happens on your job with a coworker, and you take a moment and you pause and you say, okay, let me think about how I want to respond to this. What I'm saying is, let's not put those processes, those thought processes, those pauses on autopilot. Let's make sure that they are integrated, that they are actually a part of how we communicate. We always want to be mindful, and we always want to be careful that we're communicating in such a way that builds up other people, that builds bridges of relationship. We want to make sure that that's what we're doing. And so I think about this example. It's a very personal example, and some of you who are in relationships with your spouse, with your partner, you can probably relate to this. This may resonate with you. I think about examples in our personal relationships. And of course, I shared with you that I'm married, and so I've been married for over 20 years. And in the course of our communication, attempting to build an enriching relationship with one another, there are times in relationships when you have to show a passion about something that your partner is passionate about that you may not be passionate about. And honestly, I had to really convict myself and really check myself, and I'm sure many of you have as well, that there are times when you're in relationship with someone and they're passionate about something, and it's not really a passionate thing for you, but I realized this, that if I'm not mindful of how I communicate, if I'm not mindful, even if I don't necessarily have a passion for it, I've still got to show a passion, listen to me, for the person, even if I don't have a passion for the situation or for the thing, right? And so some of you understand what that means, that you have to show, because you don't want anyone to think that you devalue them, especially at work or at home. We don't want to devalue people. We want to let them know, hey, I may not be passionate about the same hobby, may not be passionate about the same project at work, may not be happy about the same assignment at school, passionate rather about the same assignment at school. But here's what I do. I communicate in such a way that you know I'm passionate about you, even if I'm not passionate about the particular situation or assignment or project. Does that make sense? Tell me it makes sense. Nod your head. Yes, communicate to me it makes sense. Because what we're doing, we are taking command of our communication. We can sometimes share and talk in such a way that devalues people and not even know it. We can trigger people with words that we use and not even know it, because we're just communicating and we're not mindful of what our communicating is doing to another person. What I'm saying to you is that if you're going to be an effective communicator, if you're going to be a professional, savvy communicator on that job, you have to make sure that you are taking command of the words you use, command of how you're communicating. All right. So the first strategy for clear communication, the letter C, we're saying that we're going to take command of our communication. The second strategy for clear communication, after we take command of our communication, the CL, the L in clear, means to listen. To listen. As a matter of fact, if you want some extra credit, add 2 more words to that. How about looking, learning, and listening? Looking, learning, and listening. But of course, the most important one is listening. If we're going to be effective and we're going to be purposeful communicators, we have to actively listen. Communication is a two-way street, and often we are so fixated and focused on what we want to say that we are not actively engaged in listening. We're not actively engaged in learning from one another. And so if you're going to be a clear communicator, purposeful communicator, you have got to learn to actively listen. Here's the thing. I thought about this. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and they've been talking and you've been talking, and then it's their turn to talk, and you mentally move off the scene just for a few seconds, right? Mentally move off the scene. And you come back to the scene and you realize that the person you've been talking to, they've been talking and you have no clue where they are in the story they've been telling. You have no clue what they've said for the past few moments. And it's almost like you're like, okay, how long was I mentally gone? That my body was there, but my mind had moved off the scene. In personal relationships with people we are intimate with, people we're close to, y'all, this happens all the time. We hear their voices, but we're not actively listening. We're not listening to what they have to say. Again, this strategy for learning how to listen, this actually applies just across the board. Imagine being out on a first date with someone and your hope is that you're going to get a second date with them. You know what you need to be doing? You need to be actively engaging in listening. You need to be learning about the person that you are sitting across that dinner table from, especially if you expect to have a second date. Actively learning and looking and actively listening, understanding that actively listening is not just something we do with our ears, right? It is actually about mental focus. It's about staying present mentally. And of course, it's one thing to say that we want to take command of our communication, but now listening is something that you actually have to really work on taking command of, listening actively. And it's difficult. It's so difficult in the world that we live in the times that we're in. And please, I understand. I totally understand. Your mind is filled with so many competing voices. There are so many things that are on your plate, so many responsibilities that you have. Sometimes when we are engaged in conversations with others, that we are not mentally listening. We're not mentally present, rather, and we're not mentally focused, which means that we're not actively listening. Now, this happens also at work. We have to pay attention to this, especially in corporate settings. I would suggest to you listening, looking, and learning. Learning how other people communicate, learning and seeing how people react to words that are spoken. Pay attention to what's happening in that work environment and make sure that you are actively learning then how to communicate with others. If you know that Johnny at the job gets mad every time someone brings up a particular subject, well, you know you've got to learn from that. Especially if you're a supervisor or a manager and you're trying to get Johnny to do his best work, you got to make sure that you are listening and learning about Johnny, listening and learning about him so that he can move into a place where he then is able to perform the way you as his supervisor desires him to perform. That's about listening. That's about learning. And of course, it means that we have to be mentally present. We have to be mentally focused. And there's a very simple practical strategy that you can use to do this. And you may not be able to do it out loud, but at least mentally you can try to do this as you communicate with people. And it's very simple. We're talking about repeating, confirming, and of course, clarifying. Repeating, confirming, and clarifying. As you are engaged in conversation with people, simple strategy, just repeat back what they say. In your own words. If they're talking to you, repeat it back to them, making sure that you have heard them. Repeat it back, and then of course clarify. Making sure that you have clear understanding of their position, and then you confirm that there is an understanding between the two of you, and you can just do that as you engage in conversation, using phrases like this. Let me make sure I understand you correctly. Right? That's a simple phrase that you can use. A phrase like this, well, this is what I'm picking up from what you're saying. Right? See, those are phrases that are used to do two things. First of all, make sure that person knows that you're valuing the conversation, but also they're mentally keeping you focused, because in order to repeat, clarify, and confirm what someone's saying to you, you actually have to be listening to them. You actually have to be listening to what they're saying. And so this is a mental exercise to keep yourself engaged in the conversation. Just some simple phrases, simple words, and I'm encouraging you to integrate them into your conversation, into your communication. Simple phrases. Make sure I understand what you're saying. So is this what you're really saying, right? And you're asking questions, you're clarifying, you're repeating, you're confirming, right? And you're not judging, you're just repeating, confirming, and you're clarifying, right? So those are ways that you can stay mentally engaged. And actually what you're doing, and the other person probably knows this, you're not fooling anybody, right? The other person knows this. What you're doing is making sure that you're staying mentally connected, mentally engaged, that you're looking, that you're learning, that you're listening. I would suggest that effective communicators, those who are purposeful in their communication, they engage in active listening. With my eyes, I'm listening, I'm looking, and I'm learning. With my ears are open, but also with my mind, I'm actually engaging in learning and listening. All right. So the second strategy for clear communication, if you're going to be a purposeful communicator, not only must you take command of your communication, but you have to learn, look, and most importantly, the L, listen. Listen. And the third strategy for clear communication, we've already talked about taking command of our communication, looking, learning, listening, C.L.E.A.R. This is the word that I've been using throughout this entire teaching. The E stands for effective. Effective. We've said that we want to be purposeful and we want to be effective. So now let me go ahead and share with you what we really mean by effective communication. Let's define the word effective. Effective means that we are future focused, that we are focused on the outcome and the overall experience of the communication. Whenever we say something is effective, we're looking at it as its ability to get to the end of a thing, get to the overall end, right? So we're talking about communication that has in mind, that is future focused, and that is effectively getting to the overall goal. Keeping in mind that in our communication, we want it to be effective. We want it to get to the place, or get us to the place, or get the relationship to the place where we want it to be. And so to think about clear communication and being a purposeful communicator, people who are purposeful in their communication always keep the end in mind. They always keep the end in mind, right? They're not going to let roadblocks get in the way of getting to the end of the purpose, the end or the effectiveness of the communication. This, again, is why you have to take command of your communication. Right? This is why you have to listen and learn from who you're communicating with, right? Because at the end of the day, you want your communication to be effective. You're trying to get the relationship somewhere. If you're on a job and you got a project that you got to get done, got to work with coworkers to get that thing done. Listen, at the end of the day, we got to get this project done. We've got to get to the end result. And so that means that our communication has to always be future focused, always thinking about where we're going in the relationship, in the communication, and in our understanding. You bring that from the professional arena and you put it in the personal arena, wanting relationships that are enriching, right? Wanting relationships that build each other up, wanting to be in relationship with family members, with friends, with your partner, with your spouse, that enriches one another, that brings value to one another's life, which means that you've got to be constantly thinking about how you're communicating and what is the effect? What is the effect? What is the end goal? What are we actually aiming at in this relationship? And we're doing it through our communication. All right. So we think about this E word is about effective. I've got to be future focused. Now, the power of your words, the power of your effectiveness to move a relationship forward, to move a project forward, to move certain work things that you're trying to do at work forward. The power of your words come from the power of positivity. Power of positivity. If you're going to keep your communication future focused, that means that your power as a communicator comes from the ability to remain positive in your communication. Be positive. Let the words that you speak be positive, and to make sure that you are intentional about moving a conversation forward, that you are intentional about moving the conversation to an end result, right? Now, again, we got to come up with some strategies for this specifically, because I understand the problem. We live in a world full of negativity, right? We are surrounded by negativity. And someone out there right now is asking me, how can I be positive in my communication? How can I stay positive when I am surrounded by so much negativity? Here is what I'll say. Number one, make sure you're not the source of the negativity. Right? Make sure that you're not the source of the negativity. Make sure that when it comes to your communication, what you control, make sure that you are the source of positive words, positive vibes, positive spirit, positive energy. Make sure that you are a source of positivity and you are not the source of negativity. And of course, being willing to turn a conversation in a positive direction, to have the courage that if you see the conversation going into a negative arena, negative place, you have to have the courage, again, take command of your communication, have the courage to direct it or to redirect that conversation into a more positive arena. Remember, you are the commander of your communication. Those words, that's your army going out to fight your battle, to defend you. Make sure that you are taking command and that you have the courage to redirect a conversation. And there are times when you have to say that. You actually have to communicate that, to say that I'm not going to follow someone down this negative path, and to actually say it, that I feel this is going in a negative direction, and I want us to redirect this back to a positive direction, right? And you have to be willing to say that, willing to say that, having the courage to say it. Not only that, but you think about how sometimes in the midst of conversations, people can often throw things out there that are meant to lead the conversation down a negative road. Have the courage to say something like this. Well, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this, right? Right. Some people will find this sometimes in certain environments where people always want to talk about, how things were better in the past, how things were better way back when and what have you. And you have to sometimes have the courage to say to them, well, we're not talking about then. We're talking about now. All right. We're talking about now. To even direct the conversation when it goes into a negative place. I've been in some meetings where we talk about certain things that we need to accomplish, things we need to do. And there's always someone who brings up money and say, well, we ain't got the money to do X, Y, Z. Well, be willing to have the courage to say, wait a minute, we're not asking you how we can do it without the money, not asking you how we can do it with the money that we have. Right. How can we accomplish this with what we have? Let's not focus. Let's not go down this road of negativity, talking about what we don't have. Let's try to figure this thing out about how we can do what we need to do with what we have. Right. You have to have the courage to direct conversations in a positive direction. We're not talking about this. We're talking about this. Right. We're not talking about yesterday. We're talking about today. Right? We're not talking about what we don't have. We're talking about what we do have, right? You have to be willing to direct that thing in a positive way. Why? Because you want your conversation to be effective. You want your communication to be effective, and you're thinking about the end result. You want it to be positive. And at the end of the day, we're trying to go somewhere in our relationships and in our communication, and your positivity is your power. Your ability to be positive is your power. And I say to you, speak words of positivity and make them effective. All right. So make sure that the third strategy, clear communication, we want to be effective, and we want to be effectively positive in our communication. The fourth strategy in clear communication, C.L.E.A.R, we are taking command of our communication. We are learning to look and to listen to others. We are making sure we are future focused, which means our communication is effective. Here's the fourth strategy, the A in clear. We're going to use A to signify the word effective. Effective. Now, if the E is effective, the A, we're going to say effective. Now, here's the thing that I have to admit to you. I really don't think effective is a word. I think it's a word of common usage, right? But I don't think it's like officially a word, but we're going to use it today as a word. Effective communication, connected to the word affection. And those of you who know the difference between how things affect us versus how things affect us. And so as we talk about being effective communicators, we have to balance that out with being effective communicators, thinking about what we say, how we say what we say, how we communicate affects. Affections, we are talking about, yes, those tricky things called the feelings. The feelings, how the words we use, the things we say affect feelings. Now, I know what you're saying. Listen, Stephen, I can't control how somebody feels about what I say. I get it. I understand that. You're right. But if you are a purposeful communicator, if you're going to be effective, if you're going to take command of your communication, you have to consider the effect that they have on other people, that your words have on other people. You have to consider the effect of your communication on someone else. You have to account for as much as is within your power to make sure you're not using words, using phrases that affect people negatively. And we do this sometimes and we don't even know it. We don't know it, but that's why we got to learn. We got to listen. That's the L if we want to be effective, because now our affections, how we feel about certain words, y'all, it can close our ears. It can keep us from understanding. It can keep people from working together. Even if they're working towards something that is good, working towards a common good, how we feel in communication, y'all, it matters. And here's what I'll say. I won't drag this out, but I do want you to think about the words you use and how they make others feel. But actually it has to begin with how we feel. How we feel. How what is in our hearts comes through our communication. You get what I'm saying? And it can spill over into some other arenas of life. Somebody here understands what I mean, that there are times when you just had a bad day and your children had to pay for it because how you were feeling affected your communication and it came across and you lashed out. Someone here has just been caught at a bad moment, and you've had a bad moment, and how you felt in your heart, you felt actually came out in your communication. And so you were writing an email to somebody who had no connection to the situation you were mad about. Mad about one situation, had to write an email to somebody else. And I tell you this, the words that you wrote in that email were affected by how you were feeling in another arena of life. You understand what I'm saying? I think we see this very clearly a lot in personal relationships. Sometimes, again, between partners or spouses, sometimes we can lash out at each other. And what's really happening is something else in our hearts that we're concerned about, that we're upset about. And how we feel then pours over into our communication. And so we have to take into account how we feel and how the words I use make others feel as well. And so we know that there are just certain words that trigger people, that trigger a response, that trigger people, and we have to be mindful that we're not using those words. And so I just say that we have to think about the effectiveness, not even effectiveness, the effectiveness of our communication, especially if we're going to be purposeful, if we're going to be effective communicators, then let's think about how our words either lift up, pull down, give value, or take value away. And so the last strategy for clear communication, we have been through C.L.E.A.R. Remember, we're taking command of our communication. We're learning and listening, looking in our communication. We want our communication to be effective and positive. And we are even taking into consideration the effectiveness of our conversation. And that leads us to the last letter, the letter R. In C.L.E.A.R simply means reflective. reflective. We want our communication to be reflective, which means that we have to participate in what we're doing even right now, self-reflection. Self-reflection. You know, those people who are purposeful communicators, who truly are effective and truly want to build bridges through communication, whether it be at home or at work, they are always self-reflective. As much as we may say it's the other person's problem, the other person's attitude, the other person's talking out of turn, as much as we may say that, it is our job as communicators to make sure that we are self-reflective. That's why we learn to listen, right? That's why we take command of our communication. We consider the future forward focus of our communication, and we think about others because we want to always be self-reflective. We want to make sure that we're thinking mindfully about who we are as people and how that then is communicated to others, whether, again, it be professional or personal. And so I say this, take some time to reflect on communication, to reflect on conversations. Think about some conversations that have gone well in your life, some conversations that have gone well. Think about some conversations that had to go through some rocky ground, but eventually turned out well. And then you think about some conversations that went south, right? So all of us have had conversations that didn't quite end up where we wanted them to end up. And so what you're doing, you are reflecting. What are the things that led a conversation in one direction? What are the things that helped us as a team at work accomplish the goals that we would set out to accomplish? What are the things that helped us as an organization get from where we were to where we are? And to be reflective, to actually think about our participation in the midst of those types of conversations and what communication took place and what happened to get us the positive result that we wanted. And that requires reflection, y'all. That requires us to really sit back and think about the conversations we participated in. And here's what will happen. Here's what will happen. It's my last point, I promise. After this, I'm done. Here's what will happen. If you can have the courage to be self-reflective, reflect on those conversations, what will end up happening? Here's another R word for you. You will end up removing some words from your vocabulary. You will end up simply removing. There are certain words that we just need to remove from our vocabulary. And again, I'm not talking about curse words. I'm not talking about vulgar language. I'm talking about words that we use every single day in the midst of conversations with people at work, at home, that we just need to remove from our vocabulary. Why? Because they don't lead us to a place of clear communication. They don't take into account the effect of the communication or the affect of the communication. We just need to remove some words from our vocabulary. As a matter of fact, as I close out our session, let me give you one challenge that if you don't do anything, you do this. Remove this word from your conversation. Remove the word disagree. Disagree. I challenge you to be a more effective communicator, to be a more purposeful, more mindful communicator by removing the word disagree from your vocabulary. Work on that. Work on it. Why? Why am I asking you to do this? Because it comes from self-reflection. It comes from being reflective about conversations and communications. And I can tell you one of the main trigger words that causes conversations to go south is the word. I'm talking about the literal word disagree. When you say something as simple as, I disagree with you. When you say, oh, I disagree with that. I am telling you, you are taking a conversation that could go in a positive direction. And when you say disagree, you have automatically built a wall between you and the other party. The word disagree triggers within all of us, it triggers competition. It triggers winning and losing. It triggers you're right, I'm wrong, right? It devalues another person's position. It puts you on a level that you are above them, and it becomes a word that separates. And we've all had these conversations. When we say, oh, I disagree with that. I disagree with you. Or we just going to agree to disagree, right? And that's how, and we say that thinking that we brought peace. But no, we have not brought peace. We built a wall. You built a wall. Whenever you use the word disagree, and I want you to count how many times in the midst of conversations that you have with people, I'm talking about casual conversations, personal conversations, professional conversations, how many times you use the word disagree. And I'm telling you, as a communicator, as an effective communicator, you are building a wall every time you use that word. Find another way. Find another way to express the idea that you may not be on the same page. Find another word to use. Find another phrase to use. You know, I see things a little differently. You know, I think about things a little different than that. Right? The sentiment may be that you disagree, okay, but what you're not doing, you're not throwing up a wall. What you're not doing is that you're not insulting. What you're not doing is setting yourself on a pedestal to where you're right and they're wrong. All you're simply saying when you find another phrase, is that you're saying that I respect your position. I hear, I understand, right? I'm repeating, confirming, and clarifying. And I just have a slightly different take on that. I see it from a slightly different angle, right? There is a way that you can express what you want to express without throwing up a wall. And I say this to you, that you've got to find in the midst of reflection, in the midst of being reflective over the course of the conversations, communications that you've had, why things went south, why things, maybe had go through a rough patch but got better. You'll come to realize that there are just some words that we need to remove from our vocabulary. And of course, I want to ask that you would start with the word disagree. All right, start with that one. Again, I thank you. Thank you for sharing with me clear strategies for communication, C.L.E.A.R. Thank you for hanging in there with me as we share with you, and I appreciate you. Thank you once again to the AACPA. Thank you so much for being a part of our learning circle. And again, until next time, take care. We are thankful to the AACPA of Rome, Georgia, and they are a community organization under which we do Life Circle online community. I would ask that you would consider giving a donation. The information will be on the screen, and it will be so much appreciated. Again, I thank you for sharing with us, and until next time, stay inspired and stay in the circle.